This is an ABC 17 News special on Fox 22. The ordination mass of Bishop Shawn McKnight of the Jefferson City Diocese.
Nearly 90,000 Catholics are getting a new leader today in the Diocese of Jefferson City. Thank you for joining our special coverage of the ordination and installation mass of Bishop-elect W. Shawn McKnight. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Lindsey Berning here on Fox 22. You can also watch this on our live stream on ABC17news.com. Now, I'm joined this afternoon by Father Mike Nolan. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So today's a very rare, very special ceremony because this is really doesn't happen very often, especially in the Diocese of Jefferson City. This is only our 4th bishop for the diocese.
In 62 years, I believe, 63 years of the diocese existence. It's always an exciting time when we get a new bishop because you're having a man called to take a new place of leadership and position in a very important part where he's going to have a lot of influence over people's lives for the next 20, 30 years of Episcopal ministry. And like you were saying, this only happens every 20 or 30 years, so you really don't get to see this very often. Not too often. Most dioceses will keep a bishop 20 years. So just generally speaking, what is the role of a bishop in a Catholic church for people who are joining us now? Well, the word bishop actually comes from the scriptures. It appears in a couple places like 1 Timothy 3:2 and Titus 1:7. It has the meaning of overseer. So the bishop oversees the entire church itself. He also serves as a visible head of unity, a visible sign of unity for the people of the local church, particular church, which in this diocese is about 38 counties in the Northeast and Central Missouri. So I know there's a long, lengthy selection process that goes into it. I know the bishop is appointed ultimately by the Pope, by Pope Francis, but what goes into that before the Pope selects who's going to be the next bishop? Sure. There's a congregation for bishops, which is a dicastery, like a department in a governmental agency in Rome. And then there is an ambassador called the Papal Nuncio who represents the Holy Father here in the United States. And they're kind of the ones that kind of are mostly responsible for helping the Pope receive a list of names that he can choose from. So usually a list of 3 names will be given to the Pope, possibly with a 1, 2, 3 listing. Now, that part I'm not sure about. It'll have their affidavits and backgrounds, and it'll have been vetted by the Congregation for Bishops and also by the Papal Nuncio. Those names come through a long process of consultation. When an Episcopal seat is empty, for instance, if the bishop here, Bishop Gaddis, had retired and then there was a time before the new bishop was named, they would be doing some consultation with lay people, with some of the priests, with some of the people who have known the diocese, because they want to get a sense of what does the Diocese of Jefferson City need now? Right. What kind of issues are they facing? What would they like? What would help them in a new bishop? At the same time, prospective candidates for bishop wouldn't necessarily be contacted directly, but there would be questions sent to people who know them, people who work with them, people who are aware of that they might be good candidates, and questions will be raised on them. Then also in each diocese, generally each bishop has a list of 3 names of priests from his diocese that he thinks might be possible candidates for bishop, and then he would forward those to the nuncio. So the nuncio does his own investigation in here, and the Congregation of Bishops does the final vetting. Then the Holy Father, when he receives 3 names for a given diocese, will either pick a name, may ask them to start the process over again, or if it's someone else he knows, he might take it that way. In this case, the bishop retired and the new bishop was named immediately. Yes. The new bishop already had worked with the prior bishop in the Bishops' Conference in D.C. and was pretty well-known quantity. So I expect they had talked to the Archbishop, to Bishop Gaddis, when he announced he wanted to retire, and got a lot of his input on what the needs of the diocese were going forward. Okay. And we're taking a look right now, or we were taking a look here at the Church of the Cathedral of St. Joseph here in Jefferson City. As you can see, the environment's very excited right now. We have a lot of hymns. Just backing up a little bit, what are we seeing right now? Oh, we're seeing the people gathering into the church. And the gathering is as much an important part of the symbol of the church as anything, because in the Catholic Church, we are assembled. God calls us together. And the prayers that they will do and the hymns that they'll do prior to Mass now, it helped constitute this group of people gathered here today to worship God, to celebrate the sacrament of ordination of Holy Mass, and to be a part of the body of Christ, the church present. The whole church present, even though everybody physically isn't here.
Right. So we're going to start to see a procession at about 1:20.
Sure.
And that will last up until the actual ceremony starts at 2.
A lot of people to get in. And we love processions. Processions in the Catholic Church are symbolic of our journey through life. You know, when you come into the church, if you're going into some churches, like here we have 12 columns that represent the 12 apostles, you're moving along somewhere in congruity with those columns. It's like a stopping point where you stop along your journey of life to hear the Word of God, to rest in that way before you proceed to the altar for a Holy Communion with Christ, and then before you turn around and return to the world. Processions for us are very much like the pilgrimage of life itself.
So back to that selection process, picking a bishop, there are some qualities and characteristics that the bishop-elect should have, and those are listed in the Bible and other areas as well. Can you tell me what some of those are?
Yeah, and part of that comes both in the 1 Peter, also in Titus, and in 1 Timothy. In 1 Peter 5, forgive me for reading a little bit, I should be better at my homework, you know. The biblical writer in 1 Peter 5 exhorts his hearers to witness to the suffering of Christ by their preaching and living. So the bishop is to tend his flock. He is to be God and represent God in their midst. And he's to take up his duties without seeking self-gain or profit. He's to do not to lord his authority over others. And he should be an example of the life that he's preaching. 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 say the bishop should be temperate, aware of the needs of his flock. He should be self-controlled, decent, hospitable, welcoming, and able to teach. He's not to be a drunkard, arrogant, aggressive, contentious, or a lover of money. And even saying that, it doesn't mean that he doesn't stand for justice and the teaching of the church, but it's always to be done in charity.
Right. So talking about the bishop's relationship with the local church, there are several levels of leaders in the church. We have deacons, priests, and bishops. Do you want to explain kind of just the local levels?
Sure. In holy orders, there are three levels. Bishops and priests are ordained to priesthood. The bishop is ordained to the fullness of the priesthood. So the bishop can ordain priests, he can ordain deacons. Only the bishop can do that. He can consecrate the sacred chrism, which is a special oil used in confirmation, ordinations, and in baptism as well. And then the deacon is ordained to service. So the level would be bishop, then priest, then deacon. That's the orders. Then in the governance of the diocese, there would be a diocesan bishop, which is what Bishop Geddes has been until now. He's now the administrator of the diocese until Bishop McKnight can take possession of the diocese today. And the diocesan bishop governs the whole diocese. He has legislative power. He can pass legislation for the diocese, judicial power, and executive that he's to administer the diocese. And then there are offices underneath him, vicar general, judicial vicar, that can break out some of those duties. Priest can be assigned vicar general or judicial vicar, but it won't necessarily be a lay person or a deacon that would be assigned to those two offices. Almost every other office, including chancellor, judge in a tribunal, working in any number of charges of any number of the diocesan departments, often lay people will be the persons in charge. In this diocese, often it'll be a deacon, because we have many deacons in this diocese, about 65, I think, and that might even be a low number. And they share in the authority of the bishop and the work of the bishop and doing the ministry that they have in that particular area. So deacons are very important to service. Historically, they've worked closely with the bishops. In ancient Rome, in the ancient church Rome in the church in the first millennia, deacons often were administrators.
Okay.
They saw that the hungry were fed. They saw that service was provided to the poor. They saw that the needs of the persons who were in need were fulfilled in that way. And priests were counselors to the bishop that took care of the sacramental duties of the local parishes where the bishop might not actually be physically present. So the bishop today, Dawson Bishop, has a presbyterate, which is the council of priests around him, who help and advise him and take direction from him on the direction of the diocese. He has a body of deacons who can work with the priests in the parish or work directly with the bishop as through a diocesan office or in another ministry, teaching, prison ministry, hospitals, maybe a special outreach to a particular community. And then lay people that take part in that as well.
So you mentioned when you were just talking about that the bishop can impose or set legislation for the church. What does that look like? What could some of the examples of that?
It's not going to be anything generally super dramatic. He can make rules for the church of how we're to observe certain things. He may set, for instance, the age for confirmation, something that minor in that way, or he may set certain rules that he'd like the priest to abide by in terms of living conditions. You know, we're all supposed to not live a life that is fully of this world, but live a life that is witnessing to this world of the world to come. He can set some legislation and sacraments. Some legislation comes from Rome, and he can work within that. Some of it is controlled in Rome that he wouldn't change in that way. But he's responsible basically for the local church.
Okay, and while you're talking about Rome, the bishop also has a relationship to the Universal Church, which would be the Pope. Can you talk about that relationship?
We hold communion. Our local bishop here holds communion with the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. We are all part of that communion of the Universal Church, but we're also a particular church. And the word particular is a way of saying local church. So when we say the diocese, which is a word I think that originally means administration or something like that, we're talking about the local church, the particular church of Jefferson City, 38 counties in Missouri. So this church is in communion with the Holy Father in Rome. And yet, in its very existence, it is the Catholic Church here in central and northeastern Missouri, the fullness of the church here in this diocese. So it's not like it's a franchise, and I'm borrowing some of this from the wonderful videotapes that Communications Office put on YouTube here. So I want to, even though I don't get everybody's name, and I want to credit them for some of the great work they did. But it's not like a franchise or a subdivision. It is fully the church realized. And yet it is the local church. So it's kind of like a bit of a mystery, capital M, like a sacrament in that sense, of how Christ fully exists in his church here and exists in the church worldwide. So, and I think that's what we were saying about the assembly you're saying about here, the people behind here. Yes. These people gathered together are the fullness of the Catholic Church, gathered here today for welcoming a new leader for this local church.
And while we're talking about the local church, the Diocese of Jefferson City, you mentioned, includes 38 counties. That goes all the way as far north as the northern Missouri border, and then it goes as far south down to Pulaski and Phelps counties, and that includes about 90,000 Catholics. So just tell me about the Diocese of Jefferson City. What's the makeup of Catholics here in this area?
Well, I'm gonna plead ignorance on some things that I'm not sure I know the diocese that well, since I'm actually from Wichita, Kansas.
It's not that old. It was only established in 1956.
Yeah. I know in the early days there were a lot of immigrants that came both from Italy, Ireland, and Germany. You have a lot of those immigrants. There were a lot of immigrants that also, I think, have come from other parts of Europe. And then a large, population comes in, continues today from Hispanic countries in that way. So I think there's probably, like most dioceses, you'll have perhaps some towns that are very much a certain heritage of a nationality that were founded in that way and have begun to become more of different, more diversity over time, but have a proud heritage like that. And that you're going to find a lot of diversity about those different types of towns. In the Diocese of Wichita alone, you can find Czech, German, Prussian, and most of our German actually were actually Russian German from the Volga region. You find Italian, you find Irish, you find Spanish, Mexican.
Very diverse. But as far as the diocese here, it's like fairly new. It's established in 1956. Can you talk about why this diocese was formed and out of the larger diocese that exists?
Generally, when they try to carve a diocese, they want to get it to where it's going to be as much as possible a size that's usable and workable for the people that'll be there, both its bishop and for his relationship. It's not possible to do that completely evenly. So when this diocese was formed, there were dioceses in St. Joe and Kansas City and the Archdiocese of St. Louis. I don't believe there was anything down south yet. I might be wrong on that. I apologize if I am. And so they carved 3 new dioceses from establishing 3 dioceses and 1 archdiocese. St. Louis was reduced to, I think, about 9 counties or so. And then Northeast and Central Missouri were located with Jefferson City, which was a good choice because it is a state capital, and it was a good location for that. Then St. Joe and Kansas City were put together, and then the southern region, the Springfield, Cape Girardeau. I believe that came into existence in 1956 as a part of that carving. I don't know if it had a predecessor or not.
Now, can you explain what the difference of a bishop is and an archbishop? Like we have the St. Louis Archbishop.
Is this where I can tell my joke?
Sure.
You know the difference between a bishop and an archbishop?
What's that?
An archbishop will bend over backwards for you, which is really kind of a silly joke. An archbishop is a metropolitan, which is another title for being the head of a province. In the Roman Empire, the empire was divided into dioceses, which were divided into provinces for local jurisdictional purposes. In the Catholic Church, that was reversed, and the dioceses make up a province. The province is not as important in governance, but it does have some properties it would do. It's expressed as the province of Missouri here under St. Louis. Archbishop Carlson would be the metropolitan, and then the other three dioceses would be suffragans. In other words, they're underneath the archbishop there. But he doesn't really come in and direct them. They still have that direct relationship to Rome, to where there are some things he can intervene in or say, but a lot of it will be more advisory. There wouldn't be something where he just comes in and takes over unless Rome had asked him in that way. He has a few things he can do. But as a province, the bishops in the, I believe it's probably called the Missouri Catholic Bishops Conference, would be a body that meets and makes decisions that they can apply then individually in their dioceses as a conference. But the conference itself makes a mutual decision they agree to, and then it's applied, though, by each bishop in his own diocese.
Okay. And this, the Diocese of Jefferson City is a bit smaller than the Diocese of Wichita, where Bishop-elect is coming from.
Well, I'm not sure it is. Is it smaller?
It's...
Oh, it is smaller than Wichita.
I guess the notes I have say that there's about 114,000 Catholics, so a little bit smaller, but
yeah, it would be a little bit. We're about the same size in that Jefferson City is 22,000 square miles, Wichita was 20,000, and it covers about 25 counties. Yeah, I think they were comparable, yeah.
Okay.
There's about 115,000 Catholics there and 90 parishes, so.
So talking about the bishop-elect, Shawn McKnight, talking about his path, he's only the fourth bishop, like we said, of Jefferson City. He's 49 years old, which sounds pretty young. Is this a young age for a leadership role in the Catholic Church? Yes,
and it's getting more customary that they're naming some bishops in the last 20, 30 years at this age. Probably because the job of being a diocesan bishop is just like most jobs, your job or anyone else's. It continues to grow and more, and it becomes a more demanding, more expectations that come to it each year. So I think it's becoming more regular. They can retire at 75, but if for health, the bishop can retire earlier. Whereas the priest can retire at 75, except in the diocese where the bishop lets you retire at 70. So becoming a bishop is usually going to be more work for a longer time period, you know.
Talk about his childhood for a little bit. I know he grew up in a Catholic family, attended Catholic schools throughout college.
Yeah, he was born June 21st, 1968 in Wichita to William and Mary McKnight. His father and grandfather and great-uncle died in a boating accident when he was a year and a half old. So his mother remarried later to Gary Schaefer, but they did not change his name even though he was adopted by his father, his second father. They didn't change his name because they wanted to leave it to show his dad was still alive and well for him and praying for him in heaven. So he became the oldest of 8 children. And he attended Catholic schools all the way through the church. They moved 2 or 3 times around the country, I think even to Washington State at one point. And then he finished high school at Carroll High School in Wichita, Kansas. And I was an associate pastor at the time when he was a senior there in high school. We had the infamous ski trip.
Oh, so you've known him for quite a while.
Yeah, probably not bosom buddies, but I mean good friends, but you know, not maybe the closest in that way. But the ski trip was a lot of fun. It was the first time being a dumb assistant as I was, going out. We had 2 buses, and we had this bus come up trying like we were doing on Highway 63 Sunday night here, trying to get up this slice of ice to get into a camp. And the driver pulls up and he can't quite get further there, so he puts it in park, has the engine running, bus full of kids. This is how silly I am when I'm young. He gets off the driver's seat to get out of the bus to put chains on. So I had somebody else take his seat. What I should have done was empty the bus. And then I got off and I went out and followed him around to see what he was doing. He's putting the chains on, and there's a big tree here. We're at an angle like this. And, you know, you just don't want something like this happening, you know. And so he got the things on, and he pulls his head out of the back just as the thing slides about a foot.
Oh, wow.
And I swore after that I don't do ski trips. That was the last one. But I told Bishop-elect about it, I think probably 15 years ago, and he said, I never heard that one. I said, well, we didn't announce it, you know. So,
pretty neat history with you guys there. So he's been a priest for almost 24
almost
years
24
now.
years, yeah.
He's accomplished quite a bit. I know he's been in the Wichita Diocese for much of his time as a priest. He also held a position for the U.S. Conference of Bishops. Can you tell me about
He
what
was
that
executive
is?
director for the Committee on Clergy, Vocations, and seminaries, basically, clergy, religious, and vocation is what it was. And he was there for about 5 years. He helped rearrange what they were doing on the website and some of the work that's been done trying to improve homiletics and basically preaching in the Catholic Church. He also had worked in seminary work as well, as a spiritual director, as an administrator, and as a teacher, as a lecturer in sacramental theology. He has a doctorate. His doctorate is in sacramental theology. So he had in that time a chance to get to be known by a lot of people, and that's one reason probably they could select him at this age too. He's been vetted a lot over the time. He's worked with a lot of bishops, a lot of priests and deacons. His thesis is very much interested in the diaconate. His thesis was on the permanent diaconate.
Okay.
So, and he had hoped to get that, help start that in Wichita. We don't have it yet. But see, you're so much more advanced here. You've had it for many years.
We do have the diaconate
in
the Diocese of Jefferson City.
Yeah, you have permanent diaconate. You have some great men, great priests, and great men working there. So.
And then back to his background, he has quite a bit of an education background as well,
Yes,
with teaching experience. And he spent some time in Rome, too.
Anywhere?
In Rome.
Yes, yeah, he did his doctorate and his license in Rome. He was there probably 3 or 4 years altogether, you know.
Tell me a little bit more about his, teaching background, what he's done there with the diaconate and with...
Okay, well, his dissertation was on the diaconate. He's done a couple publications. He's done quite a few speaking occasions as well on that. He worked as director of worship office in our diocese to kind of get that office rejuvenated. And then people like me could come in later with it, and Sister John Patrick Beckius, who has that now, and work off the good work he did. He's been good about, I think, preaching to pray as the church prays and to do the work that the church sets for us, kind of doing what basically is laid before us, what's given to us in the liturgy and what's given to us in the apostolate. And he's been very interested, especially in evangelization, evangelization of young people. He'll be interested in promotional vocations here as well. So I think he brings a wide approach to formation and education that'll be beneficial to a diocesan bishop.
Okay. He's also served at several different parishes.
Sure. A lot of them have people here today.
Okay. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
He served a couple of years at St. Mark's Parish, which was just north of my last parish assignment, and built a beautiful hall there. It's an old German town. The only thing there is the church, basically, in the hall and a school. And then he was pastor of Blessed Sacrament, which was one of our larger parishes in town, for 2 years. Did a lot of good work there. And then he was pastor at Magdalene, which is where he's coming from now, for just about 2 years. He put a pastoral plan together, and they were planning on moving out and trying to do more charity in the area where they are. Because it's still, it's an old parish, but it's a young parish because it had moved and rebuilt into a new part of town about 20 years ago.
So he's accomplished quite a bit, it sounds like, in his
I think so,
time
yeah.
as a priest.
It's a nice balance and exposure to different ministries and things like that, so.
Okay. And when he was appointed back in November, he talked about some of his priorities moving forward that he would like to accomplish when he's bishop here. Can you talk about some of those things that he talked about?
Sure. He said he learned through pastoral ministry that these were some of the important things. Forgive me again for reading. He worked in working communion with the Pope and his brother bishops, working collaboratively with the priests, deacons, religious, and laity of this diocese to discern the signs of the times and implement a plan of action. I might get a little ahead of myself, but right here is a good time to mention as well. He'll probably be like most bishops in their first couple of years. They want to meet the people.
Yes.
Get to know the diocese, get to know the lay of the land, so that they can adjust as much as possible themselves and their work to meet the needs of the people here, to really become a part of the community part. So he'll probably visit every parish and school and hospital and probably prison. I guess there are a lot of prisons.
So it'll be quite a bit of traveling his first year or two. I know you were saying
even 2 or 3 years, and then beyond that too as well. Yeah, and you've had a wonderful bishop, Bishop Gatus, for 21 years. So you step into big shoes and you don't know everybody yet as well as he does, of course. So you want to do the good work of getting to know the people and that sort of thing. He also says he wants to foster a healthy, unified, and resilient presbyterate for a flourishing, united, and resilient church. To prioritize the pastoral care of the family. He'll be very much important on the family, and on evangelization, especially among young people, which is a big challenge for us today. He takes seriously the moral commitment that the U.S. bishops made on the Dallas Charter. He will adhere to that in protection of young people and making sure that we're accountable and that we're transparent. I'm sure he'll do well in that. Promotes the works of charity as an integral part of the mission of the church. That was something he was really working on at Magdalene. Make full use of the charisms of the diaconate. I think he'll have a deep appreciation for the work of both the priests and of the deacons, and to foster and uphold a consecrated life as a special gift to God. I understand his meeting with the deacons Sunday, I guess it was, went very well too. Was well received.
Oh, so he's already met with some people in the parish.
He's had a meeting with the priests. He's had a meeting with the deacons, a meeting with religious. Last night was Vespers. It was like the only big open group that you know, like everybody come. But yeah, he has been trying to meet with those different vested groups to you know, establish a personal relationship and to get to know them and introduce himself.
Okay. Then talking about previous bishops of the Jefferson City Diocese.
Sure.
The outgoing bishop is Bishop John Gaddis. He's served from 1997 until now, and he was appointed by Pope John Paul. First of all, can you tell me why he is stepping down?
Well, he is almost 75. And he's stepping down a few months early because he said he had health reasons and things that he explained a little bit more in the press conference that they did at the day of the announcement. But he's done a lot here. He built the pastoral center that is just outside the building here to house all the offices. They used to be in 3 old buildings scattered around. Now they can all kind of work easier together. That's the Swartz Memorial Catholic Center. He built new facilities at Helias High School in Jeff City, and they built Father Tolton Catholic High School in Columbia. Can I mention those two priests?
Yes, please.
Because every time I've told this to anybody, they didn't know it, and it was, I thought it was very interesting. Father Helias is called the apostle to Central Missouri. He is responsible for founding probably up to a dozen or more parishes that are now part of this diocese, a number that are part of St. Joseph and Kansas City inside their diocese, not in the towns, and maybe even south of here. Also, Father Tolton is the first African-American priest in the United States. His family was in slavery here in Missouri for a time, and I think after his father died, or at some point along the way, his mom moved them to Illinois where they were freed. And he had to go to Rome to be educated and ordained because in our country at that time, it's sad to say, he couldn't find a place to enter in seminary. And then he came back eventually and he ministered here in central Missouri as a priest. And this is all 19th century.
Okay, pretty neat history there.
Great work.
The bishop before Bishop Gaddis was Bishop Michael Francis McCullough. Am I saying that correctly?
McCullough? Yeah, yes. I believe so.
And he served from when?
1969 to 97. He was Episcopal Moderator of the Catholic Scouts and chairman of the Committee on the Role of Women in the Church, which was a very important issue back then. Still is an important issue, but they did a lot of work back in that time, so he would have been an important part of that.
And before that, we had Bishop Joseph Marling.
Joseph Marling, president of the National Catholic Rural Life Conference, one of the founding members of the Missouri Catholic Conference in 1967. He would have been the one that followed up, helping to get this cathedral built in 1968.
Okay.
Had all the responsibility for basically laying the foundations for a local church where there had been nothing before. So being an initial bishop of a diocese is it's at least as hard as starting a parish.
So how old is the Wichita Diocese compared to the Diocese of Jefferson City?
1887.
Okay, so the diocese here is fairly young compared to others.
Compared to some other dioceses, stuff like that. But then you have the history of the diocese they were a part of before that. So, but Wichita is about 1887. Yeah, okay. We're on our 11th bishop.
Okay.
And we've gone through the last 3, so you know they got moved, each one of them. So hopefully we're going to try to hold on to Bishop Kemble for a while now. He's been very good to us.
Well, it sounds like behind us they're gearing up for the procession. I don't think it's started quite yet, but we are starting to hear more hymns, and we are going to see that pretty soon here. But before we go into that, we can talk about, I guess, what we're going to see ahead of us today in the ordination and installation mass. It starts at 2. So what can we expect to see overall today?
Well, I see a lot of excitement, actually. You know, a lot of. It's always a lot of excitement when you get this many priests together, this many bishops, you know, the Pope's personal representative comes. So Mass here will look much like it would on an average weekend without the collection, except till we get to the point of the end of the liturgy of the Word. Then the rite of ordination comes in between that and liturgy of the Eucharist. The Archbishop Carlson will be the ordaining bishop.
Okay.
The co-consecrators will be Bishop Carl Kemme of Wichita, Kansas, and Bishop Gaddis, who will become Bishop Emeritus here in the Diocese of Jefferson City. They will be seated in front, and Bishop-elect will be presented by two of the priests of our diocese in Wichita, pardon me, maybe I'm giving them ahead of time there, Father Dan Baca and Father James Billinger. And then after he's presented, then Archbishop Carlson will go and deliver a homily. When the homily is finished and the bishop comes before them again, the bishop-elect, and they'll go through questions of promises that they'll have to make, and then they'll move to the ordination itself. The ordination actually takes place with laying on of hands, hands laid upon the bishop by the archbishop and by the two co-consecrating bishops. When a priest is ordained or a deacon is ordained, if more than one bishop is present at that ordination, only the ordaining bishop lays hands. So you'll never have a second bishop at a priest ordination or a deacon ordination lay hands, because it always is three bishops to ordain to a bishop. The ordination for bishop then will follow. Each of the bishops will impose hands in time, and then they will also do a prayer of consecration over him. And the book of the Gospels will be held open to a passage in John of the Good Shepherd. And that'll be held over his head. And that's always held over your head. It'll be a good shepherd for your people. And then they will pour the sacred chrism over his head. This chrism is only consecrated by a bishop, and this chrism will have been consecrated by Bishop Gaddis in this cathedral during Holy Week of last year. So it's kind of a nice connection in that sense. He will also then be invested afterwards with the crozier, which we'll talk about in a little while. The crozier, the episcopal ring, and the mitre on his head, and then he will be, enthroned. Actually, not enthroned. We don't use that word anymore. He will be seated in the cathedra, which we'll also talk about in a little while. The cathedra is that seat from which he governs the diocese. It's a teaching authority, like if you have a charity university.
Sure.
So, and he'll be seated. Then he becomes the fourth bishop of Diocese of Jefferson City.
Okay, so we are starting to see some people line up for the procession behind us. You can see it looks like the Knights of Columbus standing behind us.
These are the Knights of Columbus.
We will see that just any minute now.
We have 24 Knights of Fourth Degree Honor Guards, the Knights of Columbus, here with us today.
Okay.
It's a big number.
Let's talk about the church officials. I know you've already kind of mentioned some of them, but the Archbishop of St. Louis, he's going to be presiding over.
Robert Carlson is the Archbishop of St. Louis. He will be the main celebrant up until the seating of Bishop McKnight after his ordination. Then Bishop McKnight will become the main celebrant. And altogether, there are about 25 bishops expected here today. 5 archbishops actually. 2 or 3 that are auxiliary bishops in a diocese, 2 a Dominican, and then the other bishops that are retired or actively working in their diocese. There are 65 deacons, I believe, here today, and from the Diocese of Dodge City, about 75 priests.
Okay.
Then 39 priests in Wichita and other venues. There are a lot more watching on TV, hopefully, today. So, and I think that's kind of what's on that. We have names of some of the bishops if you.
So why is it tradition for all these different bishops from across the country and all these priests to come and watch this?
One of the things I didn't mention in the order of service, the bishops will all come up and exchange a sign of peace with the new bishop after he's been seated and stands again. It shows his entrance, their acceptance of him into the College of Bishops. The liturgy itself really is designed to where a priest will ask the Archbishop to ordain this man to be Bishop of Jefferson City, having received a mandate from the Holy See. And it is a sign of how the people will welcome him and they respond, they accept him after the mandate is read. Mandate is presented by the nuncio, who will read it, and then it's shown to the College of Consultors, a group of priests of the diocese who are helping the administrator and assist when there's a bishop, assist the bishop of the diocese in the governance and advice, giving advice and stuff like that. They also function when there is They can sometimes pick the administrator if there's someone who left office or had to leave office, died or transferred. Can you ask the question again? I think maybe you might.
Sure, I was just asking why is it tradition for bishops to come all across the country?
Yeah. In the ancient church, there were always at least 3 bishops that came for an ordination. The purpose for this was, in some of those early times in the first few centuries, the people might elect a bishop, and the bishop would also be a magistrate. People like Augustine and Ambrose, John Chrysostom, they were also kind of like in charge of their whole town, every aspect of things. So if they were to be a bishop, they wanted to be sure that he was orthodox. Orthodox had a more strict meaning then than it might now in some people's minds. It means right worship or right praise, literally right praise. They wanted to know if this new man who was going to be a bishop knew how to pray. Could he do what we call an anaphora or Eucharistic prayer? Could he recall salvation history? Could he intercede with the saints and the angels, asking God's need? Could he recall what Jesus did at the Last Supper when he uses the words, "This is my body and this is my blood," for the consecration? Could he pray for the church and the world? Could he do those things, recalling saints in the church, the local church at least, if not the Roman church, that literally he was leading the people in prayer? And in that right praise, having prayed this way with the people, was his example as well. Was he living an orthodox way? Was his life one of true praise to God? And so it was a very beautiful thing, and so if they found him fitting and worthy, then they would ordain him. So the bishops coming now is acknowledging that they are receiving him the new bishop into their college, that they are accepting him in his new position in communion with the Holy Father, and that they will support him, and that they're also here to see him and making his vows, his promises, that he will be orthodox, he will do right praise in his worship and in his lifestyle.
And you also mentioned the nuncio. We do have a representative from the Vatican here.
Yes.
What is the
nuncio
role?
Is an ambassador.
Okay.
He's the ambassador of the Pope. Of the Holy Father.
What is the role, or what is the purpose, his role, what does he play in this ceremony today?
He presents the mandate of the Holy Father, that the Holy Father has asked, and that this priest will state for himself that he has accepted the call to become Bishop of Jefferson City. So he presents a papal bull, which is a document that has what's called the episcopal mandate that appoints him as bishop. And it is a message given to the people here in Dodge City, to the college consultors, to the clergy, and to all the laity here. And then their acceptance will be thanks be to God, and probably a round of applause after it's read.
And he'll be reading the apostolic mandate from Pope Francis.
That's it. That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see what else. Let's discuss the switch when we'll see the first part of this ceremony is going to be the ordination, and then it's going to switch to his installation. What is the switch there?
That's basically the seating. After he's been installed, and before he does the sign of peace with the other bishops, he'll be led by Archbishop Carlson to the chair, the cathedra, and he'll be seated there. And that's when, literally, symbolically, it states that he is now the Bishop of Jefferson City.
And will he be speaking to the diocese at this point?
He will speak at the end of Mass.
Okay.
He'll lead us in the rest of Mass after that. And then when we finish the liturgy of the Eucharist, there will be another prayer sung, the Te Deum, which is an ancient hymn of the church, the praises God. And it's usually just Sundays and certain feast days and certain days like with the bishop present. And it will be sung while he is led by Bishop Johnstone of Kansas City, St. Joe, and Bishop Rice from Springfield, Cape Girardeau. They will lead him through the assembly. And he will bless the people as he goes through. It will be his first blessing of the people that he is now called to shepherd. And the beauty of it is, he's making his first journey among his people. We talked about processions earlier. We don't really appreciate that as much in the United States as you might in Europe, And I'm not European, but, it's that sense that we're walking together, walking together in that.
Okay.
Then he'll speak after that.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier there are some signs and symbols in this ordination Mass, the laying of hands, the anointing of the head. Can you just go over those again?
Sure.
Important.
Sure. Laying on of hands is part of the formal giving of the sacrament. It's done very silently by each bishop individually. And then the prayer of consecration that the bishops will pray together, led by Archbishop Carlson, is what gives him the sacrament of orders as a bishop, fullness of the priesthood. We say it leaves a mark on the soul in the sense that you'll be there permanently, you know. Then the oil, the sacred chrism, is poured over, and kind of like it was poured over Abraham many years before, you know. Chrism was always used to anoint kings and prophets. And so it says that this one is set aside for special grace, special service to God. In a baptism, you use chrism afterwards on the baby, if you're baptizing a baby, to remind us that they are now Christian. Christ means anointed one. In confirmation, and if you were confirmed at the time you're baptized, that second anointing is that sacred chrism, that you are now marked as one who is working for Christ. And it's got silent fast, isn't it? It's kind of scary. Then the chrism is also used then on the hands of the priest, who will handle these elements in the Eucharist at his ordination. So for the bishop, it's poured on his head.
Okay.
There'll be like an apron that the archbishop will wear in his lap, and there'll be another similar, I think they call it gellium. That's not a gellium, but, well, you can get it. I'll find it someplace. I get a little too much time running in there. They'll put another one around the bishop being consecrated around his hole here, and then they'll give him one to wipe with his hands as well too, because they will pour it. Some bishops probably pour more than others, but you know. As
far as his garments and his insignia, there's several things that...
Well, he'll actually come wearing underneath, he'll have a dalmatic on, which is what the Pope used to wear. And then Paul VI gave it to the deacons to wear as part of what they were. Looks like the vestment on the outside with sleeves instead of just hanging loose.
There's several things that distinguish them from the attire that priests wear.
Right.
In particular, the hat that you see.
Right.
What is that called, and what's the symbol of that?
Okay, the mitre is kind of recalls some of the things that were worn. It's like a. I wanted to use the word, what it's a symbol line there. Okay, well, it represents the Old and the New Testaments on the two horns there, and it is a head covering. And there was a translation of the word mitre, and I don't have it handy, and I don't remember what it was offhand now. I apologize for that. He receives a ring because he is wedded to the Diocese of Jefferson City. As Christ is the bridegroom to his bride, the church, so too the bishop is wedded to this church now as Christ leading them, married to Christ, who is the people of God as well. So that will usually be gold, because it is something that can't be destroyed easily. It doesn't rust, it doesn't tarnish, and his devotion, faithfulness to the gospel and to his people is also not to tarnish or to wear away or to be disposed in any way like that.
We usually see bishops with a staff as well.
Right.
What is the purpose of that?
The staff is a crozier. The crooked part on the top reminds him that he is a shepherd. He's leading his people. And they used to say the bottom part, which is straight, you know, you would use it easily to kind of bring your sheep in line a little bit, or you could use the crook to kind of pull them back in. He's to keep the people in the communion of the church. He's to keep in charity the communion of all the church together. He's to preserve us in unity. And that's one of the most important hallmarks of Catholicism. Even many of our brothers and sisters, separate brothers and sisters in some of the Protestant churches, even among many of the Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox, they recognize the papacy, the Bishop of Rome, maybe not as an authority figure over them, but as having some important part to play in unity, in the visible sign of unity. And so for Catholics, that's what the bishop is in the local parish, the local diocese, as the Holy Father is in the church worldwide, is a visible sign of unity. He's to keep the unity of the flock. It's very important, because we shoot off in all directions otherwise.
Sure, and they also wear the pectoral cross.
Pectoral cross. Pectoral, of course, means breast, and the cross is worn across his chest. They usually wear a larger crucifix to sign that he's to carry the cross with Christ and to witness to the new life that Christ has brought to us. It is a sign of being chief shepherd again. So.
And he also has a special chair.
That's the cathedra that we mentioned earlier. The cathedra here looks almost like a U shape.
Okay.
And they will unveil, if they haven't already, his I don't know if you can get a in close up on that, his coat of arms above the chair.
Okay.
And in the chair, it symbolizes his teaching authority. He teaches his governing authority, It is like if you had like a charity university, someone who is in charge of a department. And this is his new coat of arms. As you can see on this side here is his side. He has a quail listed there against a red background. The red background is his devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. The Immaculate Heart of Mary is the patroness of the Diocese of Jefferson City. On the left side, that would be on this side right here, you can see what is basically the heraldry of the Diocese of Jefferson City. What you have there is a Phrygian cap, which symbolizes freedom because it's in Jefferson City, and it was named after the city itself, named after President Jefferson, our third president. And that Phrygian cap goes back to Greek and Roman times, I guess, in terms of freedom. It was very important during the French Revolution, maybe the American Revolution. The two crescents represent the state of Missouri, and the cross, of course, represents Christ as well. The silver background, I don't think I quite remember what that was at the moment.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, right now, we're starting to see the procession start and take place. Can you describe to us what we're seeing right now? This looks like this is the Knights of Columbus that are starting this procession.
Well, the Knights of Columbus are leading in first. There are over 24 of them coming in. They will lead first, and then will probably come the cross bearer and the candles, processional candles. Cross-bearer reminds us that Christ leads us in our journey of life. The candles, as always, are lights, remind us of the light of Christ. And candles themselves, if they are, whether they're wax, and you can see them on, whether they are wax or whether they are oil, the candle spends itself to give light. So the Christian spends oneself in a lifetime to be part of the light of Christ. Following them will probably be either some ministers that are work in special capacity. Okay, these are the ladies and gentlemen of the Holy Sepulchre.
And what
this is a special organization that men and women join or are called or invited to join, that they make a certain dedication of a certain lifestyle they will live in commemoration of the resurrection of Christ and the life of Christ. I don't have enough details on my fingertips here, but it's very well known. It's internationally present, and most every diocese has several men and women from the Holy Sepulchre. So I believe here we have about 30, 25 or 30. I've got that on a passage someplace there.
Okay.
And so you can see them in their dress. The ladies are in black, and the men are in white robes. And you'll see on their robes with the Jerusalem cross. That's what we call that cross. It's a large red cross. It's very square, and then has 4 images of the same cross in each of the 4 corners. Next will be coming some of the ministers of the church that are helping serve the church, serving the Mass. These will be seminarians. We have 7 or 9 seminarians, I believe, serving for, I'm looking at a different picture. There are 7 or 9 serving from the Diocese of Jefferson City and 3 from the Diocese of Wichita. So they will be in cassock and surplice coming down. Behind these first 3 is a deacon carrying the Book of the Gospels. The Book of the Gospels is a liturgical symbol in the church. It represents Christ coming among us. It will be carried and placed on the altar that shows the unity of the liturgy of the Word with the liturgy of the Eucharist. That book will also then be used to proclaim the gospel today by the deacon. Then, only in this Mass, not in a regular Mass, we'll go back on the altar, where we'll be waiting until it's time for the prayer of consecration over Bishop-elect McKnight. Then 2 deacons will take the book and they will open it to that passage from John's Gospel on the Good Shepherd and hold it over his head. And the prayer of consecration will accompany it.
Okay. Well, we'll get back to, while this procession is still going on, it's going to go on for a while. I know you did say that there are still 25 bishops, I believe, that will
Something
be
like that, yeah.
coming in as well.
Yes.
They'll be coming in the procession.
And
as
they'll
well.
be way in the back. Right now we're up to the either deacons or priests. These look like priests to me. I don't know if all the deacons are vesting. I would expect probably they will.
Okay. Now, we've seen a lot of people are here in the audience or in the church to witness this. I know that the cathedral here seats about 1,200 people.
And they're expecting a capacity crowd.
To be full. The site was dedicated in 1959 just 3 years after the diocese was formed. Do you want to talk about, I know you were telling me earlier, the history of this cathedral in particular.
Okay. Well, the building is sits on 28 acres. It was originally bought by Father Joseph Vogelweid, I believe is how you pronounce his name, and he had petitioned Cardinal Ritter, I believe, Cardinal Glennon, pardon me, Cardinal Glennon to build a parish on the west side. They were turned down because the war had just, World War II had just ended and there wasn't a whole lot of money for that. This present church now is a modern structure with 12 columns circling the interior, represent the 12 apostles. It has 16 multicolored gables around the top of the crown, and the roof is constructed with 16 wooden pillars, each 60 feet long. The 16 beams are made of Douglas fir. And the beautiful thing about that is they chose Douglas fir because it doesn't attract spiders. So it's a lot easier to keep clean. They don't have to worry about cobwebs. And I got all this from Monsignor Kowicki and his wonderful video online, so, you know, on the YouTube channel. The main aisle is 88 feet in length, overlooked by an Eye of God or oculus. The oculus is 20 feet in the air and 9 feet in diameter. It's like the Eye of God looking down. It allows natural light to come into the church. And light is very important. Illumination is very important in the liturgy because the light in a church, if you allow it, will travel across the church in the day. And its journey across the day reminds us both of our journey each day in life and of our lifetime, the journey we have.
And there are several symbols within the church as well. I know in the daily Mass chapel, we have the hammer and wood, double rings, scroll and staff, just very detailed.
Some of these are on the windows, yeah. And these were done by Bishop Marling, apparently. The daily Mass has the windows depict the life and ministry of a bishop, is what Bishop Marling wanted to have there. And so there's hammer and wood, a square rule emphasizes St. Joseph, who protected Christ, the Christ child. And the bishop protects and hands on the Catholic faith. Again, this is from Monsignor Kowicki. There are double rings entwined together representing marriage in a second window, and every priest is to prepare couples and then to support them in their sacrament. And really, there's a mutual support in that. You know, marriage supports the priest in his sacrament as well. Just the witness of faithfulness and the sacrifices couples make. Marriage is hard work. A lot of hard work, raising children and being there for one another. When you train, I do a little commercial. When you prepare couples for marriage, you know, you teach them it's not 50-50. Because 50-50 is two really good divorce lawyers. You know, it's 100-100 because you're not always going to be 100%, but when both of you are striving for that, you're going to top 100 between you, you know. A third window signifies the teaching office of bishop to hand on knowledge and wisdom. That window depicts a scroll and the flame of knowledge. The fourth window is a crozier or bishop's staff, reminding him to read the scriptures, to protect his people, and to preach the gospel. And then the fifth depicts the crown of eternal life, the laurel of victory, the goal of every Christian, which is heaven.
So moving forward to other things about this ceremony, I know this is the fourth bishop for our diocese, but this is also the 8th bishop out of the Wichita diocese.
It is.
It sounds like a pretty significant number.
Our first bishop taken, actually wasn't even a bishop here. It's our first person taken actually from the Diocese of Wichita. Actually attended parochial schools here in Jefferson City. Bishop Tian was named Bishop of Lincoln back in the early 20th century. He had been a priest of St. Louis and was asked by Bishop Hennessy, the second bishop of Wichita, to come and work in Wichita. And then he was named Bishop of Lincoln and then also of Denver. So we have a real deep connection right there already with Jefferson City. The second bishop to be named there was Ignatius Strecker, who I think went to Springfield, Cape Girardeau, but later became Archbishop of Kansas City, Kansas. Then there was Bishop Gerber, Bishop Eugene Gerber, who was named in 1976 to Dodge City and came back to Wichita in 1983. Bishop Ron Gilmore also went to Dodge City. They were followed by a third priest from Wichita, Bishop John Brugard, who is also now the Bishop of Dodge City. Archbishop Paul Coakley of Oklahoma City went to Salina from our diocese and then to Oklahoma City. And Bishop, if I can draw from you, said you had been to Lincoln before.
Yes.
The Bishop of Lincoln, James Connolly, was a priest of our diocese.
Okay.
And it's kind of interesting. We've sent two priests from Wichita to Lincoln, and Lincoln sent two priests to be our bishop, the two bishops prior to Bishop Kemmy. And then Bishop, I think I got everybody in.
Yeah,
Bishop McKnight is our last.
Well, it looks like right now the procession is starting to wrap up.
And we're right in the place now where the bishops are ready to walk in.
So maybe we could pause and watch this for a little bit.
And our bishop-elect is right here by one of the cameras here in the back. I guess we're watching this picture that you can't see, but they're preparing now to let the bishops walk in. The priests have been brought in, the deacons are in, and now we have each bishop who walks in is accompanied by 2 priests. Bishop-elect McKnight is, I believe, that last one right there, and he's accompanied by Bishop Vaca's going to really appreciate that. By Father Dan Vaca on the left and Father James Billinger on his right as they walk in. And now we'll be waiting for the entrance of all the bishops and archbishops and the abbot who are celebrating today. And they will be in the full dress with their mitres. They'd have their pectoral crosses on. They will not have croziers, only the archbishop will have a crozier coming in. And then the crozier they'll be presented to Bishop McKnight. The crozier that Bishop McKnight receives is a gift from the priest of the Diocese of Wichita.
Oh, okay.
I don't know where the gifts come in terms of the ring, but often some groups or interested persons will make those donations.
Okay. Well, we're starting to wrap up here toward the end of our pre-show program, but let's just reiterate again. Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming on here. But we just want to reiterate one more time. What were some of the priorities that he said he would like to see happen once he becomes bishop?
I think evangelization, especially among youth, promotion of vocations. You'll want to see that we're doing charity, I know, in that way. And I think the biggest thing is getting to know the people, getting to know the needs, and then being able to respond to that in some type of pastoral structure or a plan that carries on the good work already done under Bishop Gaddis and all the people who work so hard these many years and helps move forward to the future. Because often really what we do today isn't for us, it's for those who come after us. Our faith is a gift. It's given to us by tradition, handed down from our forebears. Someone else built this church. We get to use it. What we provide for others in the future will be for their use. So it's always really about building the faith for those who come.
And just tell me one more time, why is this ceremony and why is today such a significant point in time for the Diocese of Jefferson City?
This is a sign of the unity of the local church gathered together with their bishop at the Eucharistic table. This is, he is the visible sign of unity for this diocese. And this celebration is just a joyful event that even those who aren't physically present are present in prayer and spirit. So you really don't get much more than this except maybe Holy Week, you know.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much for joining us here on Fox 22 KQFX for the ordination and installation mass of Bishop-elect W. Shawn McKnight. Just join us in a couple minutes. We'll have the ceremony for that ordination and installation mass. Again, we'll continue covering this on Fox 22 KQFX and online on our live stream, abc17news.com. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you.